And speaking of Beethoven organizing his thoughts, this descending fourth interval figures prominently in the opening of each of the four movements of the symphony. In the first movement, the fourth was extended downward to form a D minor chord, as we heard. So, 4 descending notes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And here they are to open the second movement, Scherzo. Perhaps Beethoven's single most powerful statement in his music. It's astonishing that he would do this. The 4 descending notes of the D minor chord, now infused with a demonic energy in the shape of a tiny musical atom. Each note is played in an octave, and these octaves are propelled by a rhythmic cell, which we should all recognize from the first movement of the 7th Symphony. That dynamic fragment that drove that movement now returns in the 9th. And the third one, the F, played solo by the timpani, just as he did in the finale of the 8th, where the unheard tuning of the 2 drums to octave Fs. There it was very comic, of course. Here it is a thunderbolt that provides the third link in the chain of explosive octaves. And after this dramatic announcement of the main motive, Beethoven begins his scherzo fantasy with another Baroque-style fugue. As you heard, each entrance begins with the octave drop and the rhythmic cell, from which springs a theme. Softly and delicately, and each voice enters in proper fugal fashion, with just a speck of woodwinds to highlight each main beat. And harmonically, the fugue statements alternate between the tonic of D minor and the dominant of A minor. I play slowly. But at a fleeting tempo and breathlessly soft dynamic, there's something sinister that's seething with intensity that seems to evoke the medieval danse de mort, especially as the bassoons and horns begin to skew the rhythm with accents that create new cross rhythms. The meter now shifts back and we have a full raging repeat of the theme in the full orchestra. And Beethoven referred to this scherzo as nur Possen, merely nonsense. And indeed, most scholars agree on its satirical or its comic character, a parody. And again, who am I to disagree with these guys? But I've never detected a hint of anything other than drama, strength, grit, almost demonic intensity, and a natural extension of the darkness and majesty of the first movement. The power of Beethoven's genius, in my opinion, never surpassed these first 2 movements. But now we encounter a transitional passage which is built entirely on the main rhythmic cell. So the energy level is maintained, but the harmonies are remarkable because they are so very expressive. Here is this striking passage, and it leads directly to the scherzo's rousing secondary theme. So this rollicking secondary theme is extended, and as you will hear, Beethoven has transformed it so that now becomes this. In these strings with rather full harmony underneath. But it springs back to life in the woodwinds, and then it drifts off into the atmosphere. And there, the main motive. But listen to Beethoven take this motive into uncharted harmonic areas. And for anyone scoring at home, we just move through the keys of D minor to E flat major, to D flat major, to G flat major, to C flat major, to E major, and now a unison A sharp, and B natural, which sets us up to continue in E minor. And Beethoven is at it again, not only harmonically, but he has now created a new scherzo form. We know the typical scherzo structure: main scherzo, then the central trio, then the main scherzo repeats. 3 main parts. And Beethoven expanded it into 5 parts by repeating the trio, etc. But here in the 9th, he continues to expand the architecture by writing a development section, which I thought was for sonata forms only. But now Beethoven has merged scherzo and sonata by writing a full-fledged development section as part of the main scherzo. And it will start in E minor with the fugue theme in the bassoons, a real scherzando sound for future composers to use. And Beethoven also changes now the rhythmic structure of the theme. It's always been in 4 measure units. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But now Beethoven writes in the score, in Italian, ritmo di 3 battute, or the rhythm of 3 measure units, 3 measures. So the woodwinds now play this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. He compresses the theme, all mysterious and spooky, moving from E minor to A minor. And when he wants to move to F major, well, that's easy. Just have the timpani do it. It's amazing that Beethoven would use the timpani as a solo instrument to play the descending octave and its signature rhythm. Anyway, this development continues, lightly, delicately, very much like the development section of the first movement, which the historians thought was weak. Here's a scherzo that operates in a distant, ethereal, almost impassive way, with the perpetual motion of the main theme and the motive, just darting about in this delicate web of sound. You'll hear the motive softly echoing from the timpani up to the French horns. And as the music finally begins to crescendo, the brass and timpani take over with the motive now in full triads. And the main scherzo now returns, the recapitulation, and the tempest is unleashed. Here is this entire passage, starting softly. And there, where the music stopped, we we had just reached the return of that expressive transitional passage, which settled for a moment on B flat. And here is what I consider to be the emotional high point of this scherzo, maybe even of the entire symphony. Call me crazy, but I remember how strongly I felt about this moment when I first learned this music. The isolated B flat gently descends a half step to A, and the rhythmic motive resumes in the strings, now in D major, with the same poignant harmonies that we heard before. It rises and falls, this sense of struggle of trying to pull away from the darkness. And the second wave sweeps across the music with this intense dissonance. And the third time, the music frees itself and it soars into D major, and the robust second theme returns. And triumphant D major abruptly turned to D minor with the entrance of the timpani, the difference between the two keys being F sharp and F natural. So you change that single note and the character of the music changes. And since the timpani play that exact note, F natural, they, the kettle drums, become the game changer in this stunning passage. The music proceeds as before, coming to a halt on an arresting fanfare on the motive. And now, to close off the main scherzo, a new version of the theme, starting softly. And Beethoven indicates that the music accelerates, it becomes more frenetic, until the quick triple meter, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, shifts into a duple meter, dum 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 bing bum ding dum bing, and a chain of octaves in the full orchestra, all on the notes A and D. The primal interval of the fifth, and rather furious at that. Now, starting with the fanfare, here we go. And these dynamic octaves have led directly into a sunny D major with the rustic sound of oboes and bassoons. You might recall the delightful trio of the Second Symphony's Scherzo. And here in the Ninth, 20 years later, is the same sound, the same idiom, and we have escaped the tempest of the Scherzo and found refuge in this pastoral realm of Beethoven's universe. There is no doubt that this trio is strategically placed. The key of D major that signals a respite from D minor. It occurs now almost at the exact midpoint of our journey, from the grim, ominous first movement to the ultimate destination in the finale, much of it also in the pastoral key of D major. And there are three main elements in this trio. First, the main melody, which is played 4 times verbatim by the oboes and clarinets. Its accompanying bass line, which is light and scherzando, and it's played by the bassoon. And it's interesting to note that this bass part, as dancey as it is, combines with the oboes and clarinets to produce some very chorale-like harmonies. I play slowly. Here. And this passage, the same harmonic progression, will appear in the finale. And it leads now to the third important element of this trio, a gentle rising melody in the strings, which also produces the same sort of chorale-like harmonies. It goes faster than that, of course, but we're seeing it again, just as in the Sixth Symphony, the merging of pastoral and liturgical elements. Clearly, a new phase in the spiritual progress of this symphony. The main theme now is taken up by the rustic French horn, and the former bassoon figure is now transferred up to the violins. Very light and airy. And now we move to the dominant key of A major, and this same sprightly figure is now played by the oboe. But listen as Beethoven begins to spin this shepherd's pipe motive into a lyrical nature song. And you heard the return of D major in the full orchestra now, and the sprightly motive now is played in thirds by the bassoons and strings. And as we move into the final phase of the trio, something very significant and very beautiful happens. The main trio theme takes on that hymn-like quality, rising in the violas, celli, and clarinets. More sustained and more lyrical, and the cheerful nature motive is now above in the winds. It becomes more sustained and less chirpy, more part of the warmth of the music as it expands, and the violas and celli play it like so. And at this point, a wonderful transformation takes place in the music, but it rarely comes across in performance for one specific reason: the tempo. There has been a long-standing controversy over the tempo, the speed of this trio section, and it goes back to Beethoven's original metronome marking in his autograph score, which is confusing, but it indicates a mathematical tempo relationship between the main scherzo and the trio. Long story short, most conductors disregard Beethoven's indications. So, unlike the trio of the Seventh Symphony Scherzo, which is usually played way too slow, conductors of the Ninth usually opt for a quick, zippy tempo for this trio. And as a result, it has very little calm or sense of repose. Instead, we get a hasty, almost flippant sound. And the bassoon part sounds comic. And when this passage is played 4 times in a row, it begins to sound almost silly, like a parody. At Beethoven's slower tempo, the music is calm and relaxed and comforting. And I'd like you to hear the final ascent of the trio in a performance where the conductor takes Beethoven's indications literally at the slower tempo. I revisited this performance a while ago, and I found it to be a revelation. The sustained tonic note D anchored in the bass and suspended 5 octaves above in the violins. The addition of the trombones at this point to augment the sonority of the brass choir. And you can see it visually in the score, right on the page, these majestic columns of sound. And Beethoven's vision becomes clear at this more expansive tempo. The warmth, the glow, it pulsates like an ecstatic hymn that elevates this nonsense scherzo onto a lofty spiritual plane of pastoral beauty. There's no doubt in my mind that this was Beethoven's intention at this crucial midpoint in the symphony, to point the way to the glories of the finale. And as you heard, the vision fades with the liturgical Amen harmony of the subdominant chord, and the formerly sprightly motive having acquired a new reverent quality. The music darkens from major to minor, and the main scherzo abruptly shatters the vision, and we have a repeat from the top of the entire scherzo, development and all, the mystery, the driving rhythms, the fury, and at the exact point where the trio began, Beethoven now provides a brief coda, and we hear an echo of the trio recalled, all of the strings now suspended on the tonic D, 5 octaves, the trio theme in the highest register of the winds, the sprightly bassoons, and a slight pause. The stark hammering of octaves, all D and A. The same two notes, of course, that form our primal fifth. In the full orchestra, a startling, precipitous ending. And clearly related to the powerful end of the first movement, also in bare octaves. And the organic unity between these two movements, the scherzo essentially an extension of the first movement, elevates these two movements perhaps to the pinnacle of Beethoven's symphonic achievement. Thus far, Beethoven has created a major sonata movement featuring a secondary group of 8 themes and a major fugue in the development section, followed by an awesome fugue-like scherzo with a development section of its own and a pastoral trio section. And now, for both the third and fourth movements of the symphony, Beethoven turns to the theme and variation form, which figured prominently in both his early days in Vienna and now in his late piano sonatas. And the sense of struggle continued to dominate Beethoven's music. In his early career, he spoke of, quote, striving for the inaccessible goal which art and nature have set us. And in addition to hearing the struggle in his music, you can actually see it by looking at the printed page of the score. At times there almost is an awkwardness, something slightly crude, a roughness, that to me seems to indicate Beethoven's frustration that the immense energy and titanic force within him could not be put down on paper as he really heard it. And you often see masses of notes in jagged rhythmic clusters. A Rorschach analyst could tell us a great deal about Beethoven's internal struggle. Still, in 1821, he wrote to the Archduke Rudolph of his duty to, quote, humanity, God, and nature, his true artistic quest. And with the third movement of the Ninth Symphony, the traditional slow movement, there's a clear sense that we've arrived at a higher, more peaceful plane, much closer now to our ultimate destination. Significantly, this movement is in B-flat major, which you will recall was very prominent in the first movement. And the third movement begins with an introduction, a brief introduction, a quartet of clarinets and bassoons playing this gentle two-note motive. The strings enter softly, and they hesitate for just a moment on this dark harmony and resolve to B-flat major. And way back in the first movement, B-flat major seemed to provide temporary safe haven from the tempest around it. And here we are, entering an extended movement in that key, B-flat major. And this simple two-note motive that opens the movement closely resembles the B-flat major second theme in the first movement. Here now is the theme of the third movement, played by the strings. And the inner voices now that extend the phrase here, They clearly echo the opening two-note motive. And this gorgeous theme is harmonized very much like a four-part liturgical chorale. And as much as I hate interrupting with technical details, I will. The first four notes of this lovely theme, there's a descending fourth, and then here's another descending fourth. These four notes in succession are actually what we call a retrograde inversion. That is, it's an upside down and reverse version of that first movement theme that I've mentioned, this, which now become, but you would never know it. And so if you never know it, why bother with it? Can't we just listen to the pretty music? Well, you can if you want. And Beethoven went even further than this. You recall the main theme of the first two movements are based on descending D minor chords. In the first movement, it was, right? Scherzo. Okay. Well, now in the third movement's theme, first two notes, there it is. And if you skip this next note and go here, and then skip this passing note, here you have the same descending D minor chord, now opening this third movement. And you will even hear this descending fourth in the melody. It now moves to the bass. So B flat major and D minor remain tightly interwoven. And it's amazing to realize that a truly great composer could do it all, that a great deal of the emotional impact of the music is due to its technical construction, its shape, its contour as it moves through time, its architecture. And since this lovely theme is used for variations, we should actually look at its structure. It's designed more or less in three parts. The first part of the theme, I'll play it faster. It's played in chorale-like harmony by the string choir, and the clarinets and bassoons and horns echo it. The strings now continue with the second phrase of the theme. Again, the winds will echo them, but the strings now extend the theme with a new ascending phrase like so. And the subdominant chord here is very, very prominent. And as this phrase repeats, the woodwinds sustain that subdominant chord, this, and underneath you'll hear a new rhythmic accompaniment in the strings, which has a gentle strumming effect. Also, when you hear this subdominant chord, the fourth French horn plays a descending triad, like so, which you will hear becomes increasingly virtuosic every time that we hear it. I know this is a lot of information, so let's back up and hear the entire main theme of this third movement, and I will identify all of this. Again, the woodwinds begin with this two-note motive. The two-note motive in the woodwinds, and the theme. It's in the cello. And the winds echo the phrase. And here is the second phrase. And again, the winds echo. And the third phrase is a repeat of the second, and the winds echo again, and now the horn descends. The subdominant chord, it changes, and a cadence in B flat. And the winds echo again. Now extended with the subdominant chord and the strings gentle strumming. Which moves into D major. And you begin to appreciate the expanse and the tranquility of this theme, especially after the manic energy of the first two movements. But you heard that gentle strumming in the strings shift into D major, the symphony's pastoral key. And years ago, I spent the longest time trying to figure out how this next passage we're going to hear could possibly be a variation of the main theme, until one of my teachers told me that it's not. So what's coming now is a totally new theme, like an interlude. And there is a relation between that two-note motive that begins the movement and this lovely new interlude, which every phrase begins with that descending two notes, like so. And it's continually rising. And it ascends. And you may be surprised to learn that Beethoven had originally considered bringing the chorus in at this point in the symphony to sing this passage. So clearly this lovely interlude has special significance in the overall progress of the symphony, which now moves from D major back to B flat major. So up until this point, we've had the long main theme, the lovely D major interlude, and now the first variation of the main theme begins. And Beethoven's variations are essentially elaborations, for the most part built on the same phrase and harmonic structure as the theme itself. So again, the first phrase of the theme is this. I play fast. And here is the first variation. This is very similar to the variation technique with which Beethoven dazzled Viennese society at the keyboard many years earlier. And there's an elegance and an ease to it. And when we get to the subdominant chord in the winds, this one, the strings again begin their strumming accompaniment. And it moves again to D major as it did before, but this time D major functions as the dominant chord that resolves to G major, one of the most common keys in all of music, G major, but one which Beethoven oddly never used for any substantial portion of any of his symphonies. But the interlude now returns in G major, with the woodwinds and violins intertwining, and this lovely melody. There's a sense of joy, of reaching upward, of ascending. And now we're back to the main theme in its second variation, which is in the key of E flat major. And while all the other variations are florid, There's an almost unearthly calm to this one. It is perhaps the spiritual center of the symphony. And the scoring recalls the sound of the traditional wind serenade, very warm and harmonious. And we hear the main theme's first 4 notes drifting through the texture in the first clarinet, like so. The descending fourths, harmonized like so. The motive now passes to the 4th French horn. So with the accompaniment, the voices above it, we have and the horn motive continues to descend and becomes a little more ominous now as we shift into E flat minor. There's the horn. Now the flute enters with the descending 4th high above as the music now moves to the key of C flat major, and it continues in a sort of free fantasy, expanding into gorgeous harmonies. And in a moment, you'll hear just how gorgeous this is with the orchestra. But something else you'll notice, the strings' gentle pizzicato figures that gradually begin to filter into the texture in a triplet rhythm, like so. Here they are. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, very gently. Bum, bum. And these pizzicatos almost sound like miniature fanfares, and they might be. You'll also hear a prominent French horn event embedded in this exquisite variation. And there, that's the very same harmonic revelation we heard way back in the first movement of the 4th Symphony. That stunning moment, you may remember. When the entire universe seemed to be laid out before us. The same progression here, leading us back to B flat major. And that French horn solo, I'm not sure what it has to do with the main theme. It's like a miniature solo cadenza. And the fact that Beethoven assigns it to the 4th French horn, the low man in the section, is intriguing. And when we read of the obstacles that Beethoven faced in organizing the first performance of the 9th, we find that the orchestra was a pretty motley assortment, containing first-rank professionals, but also talented amateurs, who, according to eyewitness accounts, would simply stop playing and sit out the more difficult passages. However, there was an outstanding horn player named Edouard Louis who was engaged in 1822 as principal horn of the very theater in Vienna where the 9th would be premiered 2 years later. So it's difficult to imagine that Beethoven would have written this demanding solo part without having an expert player signed up for the gig. Now, back to variation number 3. It's in B flat major, and it's laid out in the same structure as the theme itself. And this variation features a grand, florid cantilena, a long lyrical line for the first violins. While the basic theme is in the woodwinds. The theme is in the woodwinds, while the first violins embellish it. And the woodwinds echo, and now extend the phrase. And here's the second phrase. And the violins are continually more elaborate. Again, the winds echo. And the third phrase. And the descending horn, the subdominant chord, which changes, and the wind's extension again, and the horn now even more virtuosic. And now an extended cadence, which now crescendos into the majestic fanfares. And those big fanfares in bold octaves are certainly at odds with the tranquility of this movement, but they were very subtly foreshadowed by those delicate pizzicatos that we heard back in the second variation, which was in the key of E flat, as is this new section, with the ascending fourths and now descending fourths, which lead us back to the main key of B flat major for the fourth variation, almost a continuation of the previous one, but with a much more simple version of the theme. And the woodwinds play a counter melody to this that features this phrase. Which clearly seems to foreshadow which we are looking forward to in the finale. The big fanfares now return, including a solemn chorale passage. Moving once again back to the tonic key of B flat major for a final variation which contains a clear reference to the secondary theme of the first movement that we've been hearing. This one. And this time it's not hinted at, it's not played as in inversion or anything, it's right there in the first violins. once again confirming the bond between the first movement's B-flat major episodes and this third movement. And the coda now, with a gentle rhythmic figure of low pizzicato strings and novel writing, once again, for the timpani. It's interesting to speculate why Beethoven did not bring back his lovely interlude theme from the first half of this movement. It never reappears. But even without it, this third movement plays out like a gentle stream of consciousness in which we hover before being plunged into the finale. Striving for the inaccessible goal, as the young Beethoven wrote. And in another famous letter from 1815, he said, now get this, quote, "We mortals with immortal minds are born only for suffering and joy. And one might almost say that the most excellent only experience their joy through suffering." And if we substitute the word struggle for suffering, the Ninth Symphony represents the attainment of a state of joy through struggle with the forces of darkness. And we have clearly achieved peace and security as this third movement comes to a close. But this entire idealistic quest and our emotional investment in it are about to be threatened by the chaos that awaits.